first panel is on millennial entrepreneurs, and joining us on stage are Bob Metcalf, Professor of Innovation and Murchison Fellow of Free Enterprise at UT Austin, Rudy Rodriguez, Vice President of Business Development and Training Services at Eagle and Bruin Technology Groups, Grant Heimer, student at UT Austin and Director of the Longhorn Entrepreneurship Agency, and Ali Mavrakis, student at UT Austin and Chief Financial Officer at Base Drive. And last but certainly not least, Jay Kim, founder and owner of Cilantro BBQ, a huge favorite here in Austin.
Thank you, Joanna. So I think all of you, and Grant, maybe with the exception of you right now, have been involved in starting a company, or maybe the association would qualify, but all of you have been involved in starting a company. You did it at very different points in your life, with different experience and different assets when you took the plunge, but you each did ultimately take that plunge. And I want you to talk a little bit about what led you to that decision. Jay, why don't you start us off?
I've always been an entrepreneur because I was never good at school. So I took the energy of studying to whether playing outside and be creative in sports, or playing with friends and finding ways to hang out with friends at no money. So you always had to be creative. But my first business I started when I was 21. I ran it for 3 years and I failed. My second one I started when I was 25 and I failed. 2 years later I started Cilantro, and it seems to be going pretty well. So
Third time is the charm.
I guess so.
Yeah, that's very much, you can have the Bill Gates kind of award spirit about, I was never, didn't really like school, so I started a business. Ali?
A little bit of the same. But, I think what's different about us is that I felt like I sort of fell into it as opposed to being born an entrepreneur, which is sort of this weird spark that a lot of people are kind of, think entrepreneurs are born entrepreneurs, and then, they've somehow been developing all these years and suddenly they're amazing entrepreneurs. But for me it was taking the skills and the people I knew and taking all these different experiences I had and then putting them in one place.
Explain the business that you do.
Yes, sure. So what we do is simple legal software. We're an on-premise solution for attorneys to manage their billing matters. And so we sort of started with the technology instead of starting with the customer, and we had this technology, and through mentorship from programs that we're involved in, like Longhorn Startup Labs, thanks to Dr. Metcalf, we kind of reoriented ourselves around the customer, and now what we're doing is focusing heavily on that and building out that way.
Right.
So what he's alluding to is the fact that I'm not actually an entrepreneur if entrepreneur implies success. In the past, I had an idea that came close to fruition a couple of years ago. Ultimately decided to kind of focus my activity elsewhere. And so when Nick Miller and the members of student government came up with the Longhorn Entrepreneurship Agency, came to me and said, we've got this organization that really wants to promote entrepreneurship on campus. I thought, absolutely, I'm in. I grew up in a family where my dad started a company when I was about 10, and has since then really, enforced the fact that I should always be looking for ways to start companies. And so in the future, I fully expect to start a company, but I haven't yet.
And Rudy?
Well, I had the great good fortune of having a mentor here at the University of Texas, Dr. Stanley Arbogast, who always told me, he said, Rudy, whenever you see an opportunity, jump into it, take it, don't be afraid. And I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I was an executive there. And I saw this wave of technology hitting in the 1980s, these little things called PCs. And one Sunday night here in Austin, I had an $8,000 PC delivered to my house by my company, and in a book. It was DOS 1.0. And they said, can you know that by Monday morning? Well, I speed read, so yes, I did, I knew it. And it took off. Well, we used to give away all that training. So I started a company. Said, people need to know how to use these things, and I bet they'll pay for it. And so I started a company, and it grew into, I left the IT company. My wife was really scared, leaving a six-figure salary and all, and we were just about to have a kid. And but I did it anyway. I said, look, I'm going to go try something. I can do these things. $5,000. When it started a company, We grew it into 38 locations, 850 employees, and about $100 million.
And what was it that made you say, you know what, I am going to take this risk?
I hated my job.
There you go. He hated school. He hated.
No, I was working,
Yeah.
but it was such high pressure, and the career path was moved to New Jersey, and I didn't want to do that. I'm a native Texan. I grew up on South Padre Island. Anything north of the Mesa Dixon line,
yeah.
it's a little too cold for me. Yeah.
Dr. Metcalf, you were at a different point in your life than many of these people. When you,
I went to school for 23 years in a row. I loved every minute of it. I did really well. I got A's and stuff. But then I ended up, luckily, in Silicon Valley and got to meet all those famous people, Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard, Steve Jobs, and concluded, having met them, that if they could do it, so could I.
really?
So started a company.
Yeah. So what was, in each case, we'll work back this way now. What was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome to get your company going? What was hardest?
Convincing people to sign on to it was a long slog during which I ignored a lot of advice and learned how to convince people to join up. And that was the hard part. It's learning how to sell.
Learning how to sell. And was this selling to prospective employees or prospective funders or both?
Both.
Both.
Well, you have to sell yourself,
Yeah.
and you have to sell your co-founders, and you have to, in our case, the team, and they have to leave those six-figure jobs and come join you, and so you have to sell your vision to get started.
Rudy, what was the toughest thing about getting started?
A lot of the same thing. Trying to get people to follow you was the hardest thing, and developing those people skills to engage people to believe in the vision. I've always been an evangelist about all these things, but there comes a time, and especially when you have geographical or global diversity, really trying to get everybody to believe in you and align everybody to march towards the same goal. Orders don't work. You've got to convince them it's their idea to do it, and reward them, and respect their ideas. And that was at first, you're blowing and going. You're as hard charging as you can be, but trying to get people to follow you was very difficult.
Grant, let me come back to you because I have a different question for you. But Ali, let me. What was toughest about getting started here?
For me, I think it might have been, and this sounds really bizarre, but taking responsibility and recognizing that the buck has to stop with me, in that, you can't build a business to spec. No one's telling you this is the exact decision you need to make. You're going to get a lot of advice and then figure it out and do something with it. And that's the key, is that, I can't rely on somebody else to say, hey, do this. I just have to go out and do it, right? And so doing that was the biggest step for us.
You have to get to be in the front seat. You can't just go to sleep in the back seat. Right?
Exactly.
So you had two that didn't succeed, and now one that did. So talk a little bit in that experience. What is the toughest hurdle? What was the toughest hurdle to get over?
I would say money.
Capital.
Capital.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I started Cilantro, I took out all my savings and took out my credit cards, and the company started calling me and say, "Hey, what's wrong? Do you have emergency in your family? You maxed out. Can you pay the bills?" So that was the toughest thing. That they would call and I would not answer because I'm running the business now, and it still is. It's still tough. We've opened for 4 years, and we're starting to kind of get the cash flow, learning about the business, and getting better at it. But it's still tough business. Yeah.
So Grant, in the online poll we did with Professor Peterson here, who's in the audience, sitting next to my son, who is the military member that Karen mentioned, Wendy mentioned, excuse me. The poll we did, the pattern was pretty striking. That as you move down the age ladder from baby boomers to Gen X, and then from Gen X to the millennials, there's more interest in starting your own business, as seeing that as a career path. And I think you probably see some of that in your own experience here with the Longhorn Entrepreneurship Agency here on campus, and the level of interest. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm interested in your thought. Is this interest among young people, is it choice or is it necessity? Is it people seeing that this is an opportunity, or are they seeing that other opportunities are kind of sparse in the economy the way it is today?
I think I've seen examples of both. I would lean towards saying it's choice. There's a
Okay.
lot of students who realize that it's an opportunity now. People who are entrepreneurs entrepreneurs are now, a lot of times glorified, whereas they weren't as much in the past. I think you see that a lot in the media too, like
Right.
with people loving the social network. But it's I think the rise of the use of the internet has really been the number one thing that's kind of like enabled people to
Because they
start
feel
their
it's
companies.
easier to do it?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
absolutely. We had Alexis Ohanian, the co-founder of Reddit, come to campus last semester, and he said that anybody with an idea, an internet connection, and a laptop can start a company and make a huge difference in the world. And so, with that kind of mindset, millennials are thinking, why not me? Why can't I make $1 million company, $100 million company, $1 billion company?
And Dr. Metcalf, that was something I wanted to ask you. I mean, you started your first company, I think, in 1979. Got a couple years on some of these students, and have watched this both as a participant and a student of it. Is it easier today to take this leap and start your own business?
Well, certainly in the starting of online internet companies is much easier because the computer science basically has succeeded in the last 20 years, and now the tools are there. So if you have an internet connection, you can build websites, and the art in building a website isn't so much the technology,
Yeah.
because almost anyone can build a website. The key is getting the right business idea around it, but it's much easier, much less capital, much less time.
Really?
We have a popular institution here called the 3-Day Startup,
Really?
and it's amazing to watch. You can actually start a company in 3 days.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. And Rudy, even someone in this kind of world, what are the ways in which technology has made it easier for people to kind of envision going out on their own and being able to execute going out on their own?
Well, I think you can reach your audience a lot easier. I started my company by camping out at this place called PCs Limited, which is where Michael Dell started, and trying to convince people to buy computer training when he was telling them it was the easiest thing in the world. But now you can reach your audience, and you can reach a global audience much easier. So that helps an awful lot. Is you're not having to sit there and try to meet every single person.
Yeah.
And so long as you have a good product and you believe in it and you stand by it and provide the quality and the service that you're promising, people will come to you.
Yeah, how is that? I would think social media would have a big effect on something like what you're doing. It isn't just word of mouth anymore. Word of mouth is now amplified through technology.
Yeah, it did for us. When I first started, I think the card reader was in beta form, and that was in San Francisco. And one of my friends kind of shipped it out to Cilantro to use it, and that was kind of word of mouth. People started talking about, hey, Cilantro is using something that's not being used in Austin yet. So that kind of took off in itself, not only the food, but then the technology that we're using. One of my friends started a technology company called Food Spotting, and they were started around at the same time when we were going through South by Southwest 4 years ago, and they were sold for about $20 million. So I was thinking, what was I doing? But
What is that? What did Food Spotting do? What does it do?
basically, they take pictures of the food and share it with the friends and people that are following them. So I think so very simple. But
Yeah, for $20 million, you can buy a lot of food. Yeah, I mean, you can buy a lot of tacos there. Yes.
Yeah. So and we started around at UT next to Castilian Dorm, and I thought it was a great location for a food truck, but apparently there were nobody that kind of walked by. And one of the ways that we kind of wanted to reach out to people was through Twitter and Facebook, and luckily people started coming out. The Twitter followers, people that are looking for food and food bloggers, I reached out to them to kind of give us a try, and that was one of the ways that got our words through technology.
Ali, how has technology affect your ability to find an audience or just to even launch the business?
Sure. So we're sort of in a different polar opposite end of the spectrum, right? Because all of our sales are personal sales. Technology's been a great tool for us to find customers and also segment the market very well. There's a lot of really interesting tools out there that allow us to check out the competition, but also check out just a list of lawyers in Austin, for example. But you're really lucky, Jake, because people really like Cilantro. So social media's been really good for
But
you.
it can be the other way too, right?
Right, exactly. So I love Cilantro as well. I get it probably way more than I should. But if somebody doesn't like your product or service, you ultimately end up with, if risk is probability times magnitude, you have infinite magnitude associated with social
After
media.
that, it kind of falls off quite a bit. 47% good ideas about products, 44% good with finances, 44% good with computer skills, good work ethic, delegating, and analytical skills all trailed at 37%. So the highest on persistence, good people skills, somewhat knowledge of business. Dr. Metcalf, how does that accord with your own experience about what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur?
Perfectly.
Really?
So persistence is, a lot of, you will hear, we all talk about how lucky Mark Zuckerberg is or was. We try to explain great successes as luck. But when you look as I have at what the days were like, these are people who were persistent. These are people who were lucky on some days and not lucky on other days and managed to get through the unlucky days and then exploit the luck when it was good. And being able to persist, especially when you can't convince people to come with you. You have to persist in pursuing them. So I agree entirely with that survey.
What is
These
the phrase?
millennials sound pretty smart to me.
What is the phrase? Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that the phrase? Rudy, what do you think about it? How does this fit with what?
I agree completely as
Right.
well. Persistence. I have a good friend of mine who always tells me I'm too dumb to die, and you work so hard, but you've always been so lucky. What's lucky about working hard towards a goal and then hitting it?
Good people skills rank really high too. I mean, how do you guys look at these? Grant?
I think it makes total sense that persistence would be number one. Getting to see a lot of early stage companies at UT in the student startup community, you see a lot of students that come in with ideas that will get shut down immediately by mentors. To have persistence and think like maybe we're not going to do this idea, but we'll do something similar and we'll pivot over to something else. You see that a lot, and the entrepreneurs that succeed the most that I've seen as students are the ones that will take the advice, continually ask their customers what exactly it is that they would be willing to purchase, and those are the ones that will see the most success in the future.
Slightly tangential before we get to Ali and Jay. Strangest idea that was brought in that you've seen?
Oh gosh.
You can think about it. We'll come back to you.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah.
How do you look at this kind of assessment of what the characteristics are? How does that fit with your experience?
Yeah, same thing.
Persistence, yeah.
Like I said, you can't build a business to tech, or to spec, so that requires you failing and it requires you persisting. And at that point, it's basically a science. And you want a little bit more on good people skills.
Yeah.
I personally believe that sort of, especially for us, and for instance, Shalantra is a great example of that too. Every personal interaction from all of your employees to all of your customers, and that's where a lot of the good businesses have been successful. And we're not successful yet, so I can't say from us, but talking to businesses who have great customer service and have the little things, that those little interactions are the most important thing for me as a consumer, at least.
Jay, what do you put in? The key characteristics of success. Persistence, certainly in your case.
That's right. Just because I didn't have money when I started and I was in debt, I worked 20 hours a day because I didn't know how to work the food trucks, and I've never been in the back of the house kitchen preparing the food, so I had to learn it on my own. And I had one employee who didn't come one day, and I tweeted out saying that we were going to be at the domain location. So what I ended up doing was I prepped and drove there and served. And because I couldn't take the money and people were lining up, I put the donation box and said, if you want to pay for the food, go ahead, but I hope that I see you next week. But I apologize for the slow service. And they've been a consistent customers, and they're loyal customers today. So the persistency is the number one key, but also the people. The food industry has a lot of turnovers by nature. So I try my best to be fair with people and treat them like how I would want to be treated. And
You mentioned debt, right? So, one thing I've been interested in, with all of this interest in entrepreneurship in this generation, is also the generation that's leaving school with kind of unprecedented levels of debt. How big a hurdle is that, student debt, to be able to go ahead and acquire the capital you need to get going as an entrepreneur? Any thoughts?
I think it's significant. I'm an undergraduate in the business school, and I see a lot of kids. They'll go to these career fairs thinking, the only option I have after I graduate is to go get a job that's going to pay me as much as possible, so I can pay off this debt as soon as possible. And it's an unfortunate thing to see because that really limits what you're doing after you graduate, and you start thinking like you're going to live a very normal life, and maybe not start thinking about how you can start a company on your own, which I think is a wonderful mindset to have. But these kids don't have that mindset when they're worried about
traction
so
and
much
then
debt.
flip it, because maybe there isn't a ton of money to be made there, but there are a lot of businesses that solve problems right now, and that maybe there would be somebody interested, a Microsoft or somebody of that sort who wants to buy the company. And so that's why I think we see a lot of that occurring in that consumer space. But even in the B2B space, for example, for us, it's about solving friction across different business platforms, having everything in one place, because now we have all these technologies and these cool things that are happening, but we need to find a way to lasso that in and keep it under control.
We were talking before about Roy Choi, who was kind of a pioneer. He had a great. He's of course the LA chef who has created the great food trucks in LA. One of which is parked on my corner every Saturday and still has mounds of people. But he had a great quote where he said. He was the guy who kind of created the Korean taco, right, and fusion cooking. And he said, my cooking is what America is becoming. And he has this kind of sense of a kind of representing, the changing demography and fabric of the company. So when you do what you do, is it just a way to make money, or do you think you're making a point also?
No, I think Wendy earlier she mentioned passion. I'm okay failing today and knowing that, man, I could start something again. It's the confidence. It's the it's the work that you put in for the past year, like 20 hours a day for a year. So that when you fail tomorrow for whatever happens to you, you could pick yourself up and start something again because you have that confidence that you've done it. I think that it's something that you can prove yourself.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Roy Choi's, they started the taco, but Austin, Texas started the original kimchi fries.
There you go. All right, let's bring in the audience. Do we have some microphones? Do we have some questions? I think we have one right over there. Yeah. Just identify yourself real quick.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a graduate student in the Carkle School of Engineering. One of the things Lindsay Davis talked about as a defining feature of millennials was the diversity. On stage, we have some great age diversity, we have some ethnic diversity, but one of the things that struck me once y'all got on the stage is there's no women up there. So,
I'm a woman.
So, what I wanted to ask is, what are some of the obstacles, and let's expand this to minorities as well, since we have some with us.
Right.
And there are two-way obstacles, I think. Some as women entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, but also within, from the other way, venture capitalists. There's a recent article about attractive male startup founders are more successful in getting money than female or less unattractive founders. So I just wanted to get your feedback on what those obstacles are for women and minorities and how that's shifting with millennials.
Yeah, good question. By the way, two women in the next panel, but the point is completely valid. The point is completely valid, and particularly about access to capital. Can you talk about that? I mean, and especially you didn't mention, but the STEM fields. I mean, the kind of the high tech fields, especially, where it's still very heavily tilts toward men. Are there special problems about access to capital in particular for women and minorities who want to move in this direction? Anybody?
It's not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is I don't know exactly what the obstacles are, but it's definitely something that at least the student startup community is aware of. We have a girl who's done an amazing job. Her name's Taylor Barnett. She's in charge of the Technology Entrepreneurship Society. She ran a hackathon at UT last year that had 450 students. And she's very much been, worried about this issue and tried to take strides in addressing it. I don't know exactly what the obstacles are. I guess traditionally, I know more men have started companies in, decades past, and there is a shift moving towards more women starting companies. But as far as obstacles, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it's actually something we're going to talk about in the next panel. But the Small Business Administration data is unequivocal that it is much harder to get credit for minority, in particular, entrepreneurs, and they rely more on their own financing, have less bank financing, and have less overall capital. I mean, the SBA has done extensive studies on that. We're going to talk about that a little bit, so don't go anywhere. Other questions over here?
Thank you. I'm Baylor Morrison. I'm an economics undergrad student. I was just wondering, how did you address criticism when you were just beginning your companies, especially from people close to you?
Yelp, Twitter, Facebook, they're all personal. I would wake up in the middle of the night and check Yelp reviews just to see if we get 3.5 stars. So they're all personal, but they're great, feedback and telling yourself you have to do better, you have to, move forward, fix the problems that customers are addressing, because they're important.
For me, there's two sides of that. One is that yes, customer information and feedback is super important to me, and it's something that does keep me up at night. But also, one of the things I've learned through the program, and speaking with Dr. Metcalf, for example, or anybody else who's done a lot, is that especially at the beginning, you can't sell to everybody, and so knowing who your customer is and who's going to pay you to do what you do is really important. And so, taking criticism and feedback is important, but knowing that the criticism and feedback you're getting from people who are going to pay you to do your core value, that's the more important feedback, and that's how I kind of sleep at night.
Okay, another question. All the way in the back. I think this is our last one.
Going off of that question, by the way, my name is Liz. I'm a freshman, and I'm doing international relations currently. And so, in regards to obtaining that criticism from your consumers, what exactly allowed you to shift, or have you ever shifted your marketing strategies or your pretty much your ideals in regards to your product in order to fit that, or did you overcome it at some point, and how did you do that?
So I think there's art in deciding when you're wrong and when you're right. But if you're terrified of criticism, that's the wrong place to be. So I find it easy. No one likes me, and I am constantly. But sometimes they're wrong. A lot of times they're wrong. So it's deciding. I guess that's my message. That you need to tolerate criticism, but then in the midst of it, you must decide which of it is worth listening to and which of it needs to be opposed. It's not a black or white.
All right. We're supposed to be off the stage like right now, so I can't take the question, but I want to ask, even though I will be yelled at, I want to ask you all real quick, if you could give one piece of advice to people out there who would like to be a year from now sitting up here as someone who has started their own company, what would be kind of the one key thing you would tell them? Hard work.
Start now. There's never going to be someone who's going to pluck you out and say, you're the guy, start that company. Like, just do it now.
The thing I've heard most, and that I was most surprised to hear about from speakers that we've had on campus that have been successful starting their own companies, is don't be afraid to share your idea early on. You always think that you're going to get your idea stolen or something like that. It's probably not going to happen, and the feedback you get early on is invaluable.
When you wake up in the morning, if you're passionate about it, your idea, get up and do it.
Final word.
Learn how to sell, and the secret, while we're at it, is listening.
Interesting. Join me thanking this terrific panel. We've got one more panel for you. Joanna
Thank
will
you so much to our panelists.